Stanley, my boy. Mort's gravelly voice crackled over the line. To what do I owe the dubious pleasure? Don't tell me Periwinkle cited you for aesthetically pleasing shadows again. Close, I chuckled darkly. She called my fence aggressive. Issued a fine. Demanded modifications. Aggressive? That sleek black number? It's minimalist perfection. What does she want? Teddy bears welded to it? Something softer, I said. So I had an idea. Needs your expertise. Involves barbed wire. A pause. Then a slow, delighted cackle echoed down the line. Barbed wire? You're going to wrap that fence in barbed wire? And roses, I added. Climbing, thorny roses, entwined. Let me tell you about my fence. Not just any fence, mind you, but the fence. The one that became a local legend, a source of neighborhood controversy, and possibly a Class II tetanus hazard cleverly disguised as landscape art. It all started, as these things inevitably do in the beige battleground of Oakwood Meadows, with a letter from the Homeowners Association. But first, the fence itself. It wasn't aggressive. Seriously. Unless you consider clean lines and a distinct lack of plastic flamingos aggressive, after years of staring at the sad, sagging remnants of the builder-grade split-rail fence that came with the house, a fence whose primary function seemed to be passively suggesting where my property vaguely ended, I'd finally splurged. I had installed a beautiful modern fence, black powder-coated aluminum, 6 feet high exactly, with sleek vertical bars and flat, minimalist post caps. No scrolls, no fleur-de-lis, just strong, clean geometry. It provided privacy, kept the dog contained mostly, and in my humble opinion looked sharp as hell against the green of the lawn. It was elegant. It was contemporary. It was apparently an affront to God and the Architectural Review Committee. Across the street lived Prudence Periwinkle. Yes, that was her actual name. Prudence was the self-appointed guardian of Oakwood Meadows' gentle character, a phrase she wielded like a weaponized doily. Her own house was a symphony in sandy beige, with foundation plantings so meticulously pruned they looked vaguely terrified. Anything that deviated from her narrow definition of harmonious, a slightly too bright welcome mat, a mailbox deviating from the approved shade of greige mist, my fence was subject to her immediate and unwavering disapproval. I knew she hated the fence from day one. I'd be out mowing the lawn, and I'd catch her peeking through her perfectly aligned vertical blinds, her expression suggesting she'd just witnessed a public indecency. One afternoon, while she was performing some arcane ritual involving hedge clippers and an unnervingly precise spirit level on her already geometrically perfect boxwoods, she looked across at my fence and actually shuddered, visibly, as if its clean, black lines were emitting harmful radiation. "Afternoon, Prudence," I called over, wiping sweat from my brow. "Getting those hedges into regulation shape?" She turned slowly, her eyes narrowing at my fence before settling on me. "Richard," she said, her voice thin and reedy, "some structures just possess such a hostile energy, don't you think? So unwelcoming. It quite disrupts the neighborhood's serenity." She snipped viciously at an imaginary stray leaf and turned back to her shrubs, conversation clearly over. Hostile energy? It was aluminum, powder-coated. Probably the least hostile building material known to man, unless you tripped over it. But I knew what was coming. Prudence didn't just disapprove. She acted. The beige envelope arrived a week later, hand-delivered by a man who looked like he carried the weight of 1,000 petty neighborhood disputes on his slumped shoulders. Mr. Abernathy, HOA president. He mumbled something about board meeting, fence concerns, and formal notice, before practically fleeing back to his sensible hybrid. I opened it with that familiar sense of dread mixed with burgeoning rage. There it was, in black and white, couched in passive-aggressive bureaucraties. Dear homeowner, so personal. It has come to the attention of the Architectural Review Committee following resident feedback. Read, Prudence complained. A lot. That the recently installed fencing at Lot 24 presents a significant deviation from the established aesthetic standards of the Oakwood Meadows community. Specifically, the fence is deemed aesthetically aggressive and visually discordant under Bylaw 66B, Maintenance of Harmonious Neighborhood Character. Factors cited include, but are not limited to, hostile coloration, black, sharp and unwelcoming vertical elements, and a general lack of softening features appropriate to a residential setting. A fine of $75 is hereby assessed. The homeowner is required to submit a remediation plan to the ARC within 30 days, outlining modifications to incorporate softer lines and approved neutral tones. See Appendix J for approved fence palettes. Spoiler, mostly beige and white. I read it aloud to Clara, my wife, my voice rising with each ridiculous phrase. Aesthetically aggressive? It's a fence. It keeps the dog in. What do they want? Fluffy clouds painted on it? Hostile coloration? It's black. It's chic. It recedes visually. Clara sighed, putting down her coffee cup. She was used to my HOA skirmishes. Okay, deep breath, Stan. Sharp vertical elements. Maybe the post caps look a bit pointy. And you know, Prudence considers anything darker than ecru hostile. Can't you just, I don't know, put rounded caps on, paint it gentle dove gray? Paint my beautiful fence gray, I sputtered. Surrender to the beige blob? Let Prudence dictate my aesthetic choices with her nonsense about negative energy? Never. It's the principle of the thing. Is it? Clara asked, raising an eyebrow. Or is it just that you enjoy winding Prudence Periwinkle up? Okay, maybe it's 60% principle, 40% winding Prudence up, I admitted. But still, I tried talking to Prudence, cornered her during her ritualistic sweeping of her already immaculate driveway. Prudence, I began, trying for calm reason. About the fence, fine. Aggressive? Really? Can you tell me specifically what makes it aggressive? She stopped sweeping, clutching the broom handle like a scepter. Stanley, she said, her voice dripping with faux patience. It's not about specifics. It's about the feeling. It feels harsh, unfriendly. It doesn't whisper, welcome. It screams, keep out. This neighborhood values a gentle, welcoming aesthetic. Your fence does not. She sniffed. Perhaps consider a lovely white picket, or a charming split rail, something softer, gentler, welcoming. My fence wasn't aggressive enough. It needed modification. Okay, Prudence. Okay, HOA. You want modified? You want a statement? You'll get one. That night, I sat in my garage, staring at the offending black aluminum panel I had left over from installation. Aggressive. The word echoed in my head. How could I comply, yet also not comply? How could I make it more aggressive, yet simultaneously argue I was softening it? My eyes drifted to a tangled mess in the corner, remnants from clearing out the back property line years ago. Old, rusty, gloriously vicious-looking barbed wire. The ultimate symbol of keep out. Undeniably aggressive. Then I thought about Prudence's perfectly manicured, utterly boring garden, and an image bloomed in my mind, barbed wire, interwoven with something beautiful, something natural, something thorny. Climbing roses. Huge, thorny, rampant climbing roses, barbed wire and roses, aggression and beauty, danger and romance, rust and petals. It was perfect. It was perverse. It was landscape design as malicious compliance. It was art. My phone was already dialing Mort Blackwood, the neighborhood's resident eccentric and Gothic gardening guru. His front yard featured weeping wisterias, black mondo grass, and at least 3 cast-iron gargoyles. He loathed Prudence Periwinkle. Mort? Stan Miller. Stanley, my boy? Mort's gravelly voice crackled over the line. To what do I owe the dubious pleasure? Don't tell me Periwinkle cited you for aesthetically pleasing shadows again. Close? I chuckled darkly. She called my fence aggressive, issued a fine, demanded modifications. Aggressive? That sleek black number? It's minimalist perfection. What does she want? Teddy bears welded to it? Something softer, I said. So I had an idea. Needs your expertise. Involves barbed wire. A pause. Then a slow, delighted cackle echoed down the line. Barbed wire? You're going to wrap that fence in barbed wire? And roses, I added. Climbing, thorny roses, entwined. Another pause, longer this time. Then Mort let out a whoop of pure joy. Stanley! That's not just compliance, that's genius. That's subversive horticulture. It's beautiful, darkly beautiful. Do you need wire? I think I have some vintage stuff in the shed. Tetanus adds character, you know. Project Beauty and the Beast was officially underway. Phase 1. Reconnaissance and procurement. First, the wire. Mort's vintage stuff turned out to be several rolls of genuinely ancient, terrifyingly rusty barbed wire he claimed came off an old decommissioned farm upstate. I suspected it was more likely salvaged from a scrapyard, but didn't ask. Perfect for the aesthetic. Questionable for safety and legality. A quick search of city ordinances confirmed my fears. Bureaucratic Hurdle 1. Ordinance 34J, Paragraph 3. Installation of barbed wire, razor wire, or similar fencing materials incorporating sharpened points or edges is prohibited in all residential zones, R1, R2, R3, on fences less than 6 feet in height. My fence was exactly 6 feet. Damn it. I presented the problem to Mort over strong, sludgy coffee in his gargoyle-adjacent backyard. He waved a dismissive hand, nearly knocking over a small stone skull. Technicalities, Stanley, semantics. Is it a fence topped with wire, or is it a structural support system for vigorous vertical plantings, incorporating recycled metallic elements for textural contrast? Frame it right, my boy, frame it right. He suggested we could argue the wire wasn't on top, but integrated. Or maybe just install it and see what happened. We decided on the latter, combined with the artistic trellis defense. Next, the roses. Mort was in his element. We spent an afternoon poring over his collection of antique rose catalogs. Forget those dainty hybrid teas, Stan, he declared, pointing a soil-stained finger at a picture of a monstrously thorny climber. Blaze improved, classic, vigorous, covered in thorns like tiny daggers, and blood-red blooms, very dramatic against the black fence and rust. We also selected Dr. Huey, a notoriously rampant rootstock often used for grafting, known for its disease resistance and sheer thorny determination. We ordered dozens of bare root plants online. Clara watched the deliveries, menacing rolls of rusty wire, large ominous bags labeled blood meal, and boxes upon boxes of dormant, thorny sticks with escalating horror. Stan, she pleaded one evening, surveying the growing pile in the garage. Our front yard looks like we're preparing for trench warfare, not enhancing curb appeal. Are you sure about the barbed wire? It's crucial for the juxtaposition, Clara, I insisted. The duality, beauty and danger. Besides, I added, trying to sound reassuring, the roses will mostly cover it eventually. Think of it as Structural reinforcement with a floral motif. She didn't look convinced. The following Saturday, Operation Barbed Beauty commenced. Mort arrived clad in thick leather welding gloves and what looked suspiciously like antique chainmail coif under his gardening hat. "Safety first, Stanley," he chirped, brandishing a pair of heavy-duty fencing pliers. Wrestling with that rusty, recalcitrant wire was an experience. It snagged on everything. It recoiled unexpectedly. It seemed actively hostile. We stretched strands along the top rail, twisted shorter pieces around the vertical bars, aiming for a look that was less prison camp and more industrial chic meets hostile takeover. Mort hummed cheerful sea shanties while expertly manipulating the barbs. I mostly bled. "Ow, damn it!" I yelped, pulling my hand back after a particularly vicious barb snagged my glove and the finger inside. Mort peered at the dripping blood. "Ah, excellent. A sacrifice to the garden gods. And a little extra iron for the roses when you bleed on the soil. See? Synergy." Neighbors emerged, drawn by the unusual activity and perhaps the faint scent of impending tetanus. Mrs. Gable from next door watched with wide, fascinated eyes. Young Dave Miller from down the street gave a slow whistle. "Whoa, Stan. Going for the post-apocalyptic look?" And across the street, Prudence Periwinkle appeared on her porch, phone pressed to her ear, face a mask of pure, unadulterated horror. I knew who she was calling. Abernathy arrived within the hour, sirens practically audible in his voice even before he got out of his car. "Stanley, for the love of all that is harmonious, what is that?" He gestured wildly at the fence, now glinting menacingly with its new adornment. "Morning, Mr. President," I said brightly, carefully wiping blood off a fence post. "Just starting phase 1 of my HOA mandated fence modification, adding structural support for my vertical planting initiative." "Vertical planting?" Abernathy squeaked. "That's barbed wire." "Recycled metallic elements," Mort corrected gravely, adjusting his chainmail. "Providing necessary framework and textural interest." Abernathy looked like his head might explode. He sputtered about bylaws, fines, immediate removal, then seemed to run out of steam, muttering something about needing his blood pressure medication before retreating. He must have called the city immediately, because Officer Davies arrived that afternoon. Bureaucratic hurdle 2. Davies looked even wearier than during the Great Treehouse Telescope War. He surveyed the fence, the rusty wire, my bandaged finger, Mort humming nearby. He sighed, a deep, soul-weary sigh. "Mr. Miller," he began, consulting his tablet. "Received a complaint, Ordnance 34J barbed wire." "Ah, Officer Davies," I said, launching into my prepared defense. "Glad you're here. As you can see, this isn't primarily a fence with barbed wire. It's an integrated trellis structure. A piece of landscape art, really. The wire provides necessary support for the vigorous climbing roses I'm about to install. See the planting holes?" I gestured vaguely. Completely different context from simple perimeter fencing. Davies squinted at the wire, then at me. "Landscape art?" "Mixed media," Mort added helpfully. "Evokes the inherent tension between nature and industry." Davies rubbed his temples. "Look, Mr. Miller, art or not, those barbs look sharp, and the ordinance—" He sighed again. "Okay, I have to issue a citation. Failure to remove prohibited wire within 15 days. You can appeal it, argue the trellis thing at the hearing." He handed me the ticket. "Just try not to impale anyone in the meantime, okay?" The citation was a setback, but not a deterrent. While filing my appeal, re-artistic trellis structure misclassification, I launched phase 2 with gusto. Planting the roses, dozens of them. Bare root bundles of thorny sticks that looked dead but held immense potential for aggressive growth. Digging holes in the compacted clay soil was brutal. Amending with compost, bone meal, and blood meal, Mort was insistent, felt slightly vampiric. Then came the wrestling match, untangling the thorny canes, positioning them against the fence, carefully tying them to the aluminum bars and strategically weaving them through the strands of barbed wire. My arms looked like I'd arm-wrestled a bramble bush and lost badly. Clara took one look at my shredded forearms and just handed me the first aid kit without comment. "Remember, Stan," Mort advised, overseeing my bloody efforts. "Encourage them to climb into the wire. They need to become one. Flesh and steel, flower and barb." He sounded disturbingly enthusiastic. Slowly, painstakingly, the bare roots went in. The thorny canes were tied up, watered, mulched. The foundation for my beautiful monstrosity was laid. Weeks passed. Spring turned into early summer, and the roses, fueled by righteous indignation, mine, and copious amounts of blood meal, Mort's, exploded. They grew with alarming speed, green shoots snaking upwards, leaves unfurling, tendrils reaching for the sun and wrapping around the rusty wire. The fence began to transform. The harshness of the black aluminum and rusty wire started to soften, punctuated by burgeoning green leaves. But the thorns were everywhere, mingling with the barbs, creating a barrier that was both organic and menacing. It was bizarre, disturbing, and, I had to admit, kind of spectacular. Neighborhood reaction was, predictably, intense. Confusion reigned. Was it art? Was it a threat to Hermwood? Was it just Stan being weird again? Prudence Periwinkle reportedly told Abernathy it was a blight far worse than the original fence, and demanded immediate, forceful action from both the HOA and the city regarding the citation. I was now fighting a two-front war, armed only with thorny roses, dubious legal arguments, and Mort's unwavering support. The battle for the soul of my fence, and possibly my sanity, was fully engaged. The next few months were a masterclass in bureaucratic trench warfare and aggressive horticulture. First, the city citation appeal for the barbed wire. I showed up at the municipal court annex armed with photos, not just of the wire, but of the roses, now thick and leafy, starting to obscure large sections of it. "Your Honor," I argued to the weary-looking administrative judge, who looked suspiciously like Janice Lee from Zoning. Maybe they rotated. "As you can see from Exhibit B and C, the wire is no longer the primary feature. It serves as an integral structural component of this extensive vertical rose trellis. It is being rapidly enveloped by natural plant material, mitigating any alleged hazard while contributing to the overall artistic and horticultural statement. I might have thrown in terms like living sculpture and biodegradable integration. The city attorney argued Ordinance 34J was clear. Barbed wire is barbed wire. The judge sighed. The ruling? A partial victory. The citation stood, but the fine was suspended pending re-inspection in 90 days. If the wire was substantially concealed by vegetative growth by then, the citation might be dismissed. A ticking clock, but also a loophole. Meanwhile, the HOA front. Abernathy convened a special hearing. Prudence presented a PowerPoint that could only be described as 50 shades of fence fury, detailing every perceived offense, from the menacing wire to the aggressive profusion of thorns and the inappropriate blood-red color of the burgeoning rosebuds. She cited bylaws about hazardous landscaping, unapproved structural alterations, and failure to maintain a welcoming appearance. My defense: I presented the city's pending citation dismissal as proof the wire was becoming a non-issue. I argued the roses were the softening modification they demanded. Are roses not the epitome of garden beauty, Prudence? I asked innocently. These are simply robust specimens, providing both beauty and security. I showed pictures of blooming climbing roses on charming English cottages, conveniently omitting any close-ups of their thorns. The board, faced with my permit copies, the city's ambiguous ruling, and possibly Mort glaring from the back row, punted. They issued another warning, tabled the fines, and demanded ongoing monitoring of the rose growth. Stalemate again. Summer arrived, and the roses went supernova. The blaze improved, lived up to its name, erupting in clusters of fiery red blooms. Dr. Huey, though technically rootstock, threw out monstrously long, wickedly thorny canes that wove through the wire like sentient tentacles. The fence became a wall of green leaves, vibrant red flowers, and lurking danger. The barbed wire was now maybe only 30% visible, glinting menacingly here and there between the foliage. The thorns, however, were everywhere. Huge, hooked, vicious things that snagged clothing and skin with alarming efficiency. Life with the fence required adjustment. I bought welder's gauntlets for pruning, which became a bi-weekly necessity to keep the sidewalk passable. Cheryl, our mail carrier, started leaving packages on the porch instead of attempting the mailbox by the gate. Small dogs gave the fence a wide berth. Mrs. Gable declared it dramatically beautiful, dear, like something out of a Gothic novel. Dave Miller just shook his head and laughed every time he walked past. Prudence, however, was not deterred. Her complaints shifted from the wire to the roses themselves. They were overgrown, hazardous, attracting stinging insects, and the red color was jarring. I received blurry photos from Abernathy, clearly taken by Prudence, allegedly showing a bee near a rose bush. I suspected sabotage, maybe salting the earth near the roots or midnight pruning raids, so I repurposed some old motion-activated Halloween decorations. Nothing scares off a would-be rose assassin like a plastic skull suddenly lighting up and cackling maniacally at 2 a.m. The nocturnal tampering ceased. The final confrontation came not in a hearing room, but right there on the sidewalk. It was a hot Saturday afternoon. I was inside, trying to watch a baseball game. Suddenly, I heard a yelp, followed by a string of distinctly un-Prudence-like curses coming from my front yard. I rushed outside, and there she was, Prudence Periwinkle, tangled, hopelessly, hilariously tangled in my rose fence. Apparently, armed with nothing but tiny floral print gardening gloves and a pair of miniature shears suitable for snipping bonsai trees, she had decided to take corrective pruning action herself on a particularly exuberant cane reaching towards the sidewalk. The rose fought back. A long, thorny tendril had snagged her cardigan sleeve. As she struggled, another wrapped around her ankle. A third seemed to have affixed itself firmly to her tightly permed hair. She was caught fast, like a fly in a particularly beautiful thorny spiderweb, shears dangling uselessly from her trapped hand. Neighbors were starting to emerge. Dave was filming discreetly with his phone. Mrs. Gable tutted sympathetically while clearly enjoying the spectacle. Abernathy, alerted by who knows who, arrived, looking like he was about to have a stroke. "Stanley," Abernathy gasped, Your fence. It's attacked Prudence." "My fence didn't attack anyone, Mr. President," I said calmly, fetching my heavy-duty welder's gauntlets and a pair of bypass loppers. "Looks like Prudence got a bit too familiar with the defensive planting." Carefully, meticulously, I began snipping away the offending thorns, freeing Prudence branch by painful branch. She remained rigidly silent throughout the ordeal, refusing to meet my eye, her face flushed crimson under her floral sun hat. By the time she was free, her cardigan was shredded, her hair was askew, and her dignity was in tatters. She smoothed her ruined clothes, gave me one final look of pure hatred, and hobbled back across the street without a word. The Great Fence War was effectively over. She couldn't fight something that had literally fought back. After the pruning incident, a strange peace descended. The city inspector came back, saw the wire was indeed substantially concealed, buried under a mountain of thorny greenery, and reluctantly dismissed the citation. The HOA, perhaps fearing further public humiliation or actual bodily harm lawsuits, went completely silent on the fence issue. They quietly passed a new, incredibly detailed bylaw regarding maximum allowable thorn length on approved plant species, but my roses were grandfathered in by sheer tenacity. Prudence avoided my side of the street entirely. Her glares, when they occurred, seemed less furious, more defeated. And the fence? It thrives. It's a monster, requiring constant, careful trimming, always with the gauntlets. But when it blooms, it's spectacular. A wall of vibrant red against deep green, the black aluminum and rusty wire only occasionally visible deep within, like dark secrets. It's beautiful. It's dangerous. It's unique. It's mine. I was out there yesterday meticulously pruning, clad in my protective gear. Found a perfect blood-red bloom nestled right against a rusty barb. Beauty and the beast, indeed. I snipped it carefully. Clara brought me lemonade. "Try not to impale yourself before dinner, dear," she said, the usual sigh in her voice, but her eyes were smiling. "Wouldn't dream of it," I replied, sniffing the rich fragrance of the rose. I looked at my thorny fortress, a testament to principle, pettiness, and the surprising beauty of malicious compliance. Aggressive? I thought, glancing towards Prudence's now perpetually drawn blinds. Maybe, but definitely not beige. I took the rose inside and put it in a vase right by the front door. A thorny welcome, just in case.